This is the new 4K release of DUNE Part 2, Denis Villeneuve's sequel to his 2021 film. I think the first thing I've got to say about this is that if you haven't seen the first film or you don't know the Dune stories, I don't think you can really go into this one completely blind, so worth having a look at that first film, or at least reading up on what the story is. Basically a campaign for power and empire. Well, this is a rather expensive 4K release, given that it's £25. At least it is an HMV £24.99, so probably £25 in FOP, and only comes with a single 4K disc. And there are quite a few extras on here. I think there's 8 featurettes, and they have a total running time of approximately 65 minutes. So that could possibly have an impact on the availability of space for the actual movie on this 4K, but it does appear to be a 100GB disc, a triple layer disc, if I'm correct, looking at the barcodes on the inner ring of the disc on the playing surface. Yes, I've been learning from Trevor at Double Bill Movies, but I did not notice any compression artifacts, anything that spoiled the overall image quality. And although there's no Blu-ray in this pack to compare the 4K against, I did of course see this film recently at the BFI IMAX on the only 1570 blow-up print in the UK, so I have a pretty good recollection of how this looked. This is similar, but the 1570 print did have a more striking filmic look, and although this compares well, there were some scenes at the IMAX, particularly in the 1.43:1 image aspect scenes. There were some of those where the image quality improved markedly at the IMAX, and you couldn't help but notice because the screen there is so huge. I don't know what the difference in screen size is in here, but around 10 feet wide and a fixed aspect ratio of 2.40:1, we're probably getting to around 1/100th the image size, or 1/70th maybe the image size of what we saw at the BFI IMAX. So in that regard, the IMAX of course has a lot more impact than this 4K disc, and if you're watching this on a television, you'll find that the image quality looks extremely sharp, extremely well defined. The contrast, the density is exceptionally good, and the colour has a certain sort of Dune look to it that I now appreciate more, having watched Dune again recently in order to get into it and really enjoy the characters. And to see this, they've both got a similar look across both films, so good continuity between both. But I think you've got to watch the first film to get the most out of this one and fully understand the storyline. It was shot entirely using digital video at 4.5K and 6.5K to produce the 4K master file, so a genuine 4K disc here, but don't expect any Nolan-esque genuine 1565 for 1570 release IMAX prints here. It's not that sort of movie. It has a particular look that's sort of almost unique to the Dune look that Denis Villeneuve has generated for this, or his cinematographer and the whole design team has generated for this. I like the otherworldly look produced for both of these films, and in the IMAX you've got 1:43:1 aspect ratio for about an hour of it. I think most of it is 1:90:1, or at least that's what the technical details tell us. It looked a bit 1:78:1 to me, but could have been where I was sitting. But looking at it in the IMAX, I was reading in my head as to what the scope frame would have looked like, the 2.40:1 that we get here. And the subtitles were positioned, I believe, so that they didn't have to do any jiggery-pokery with moving the subtitles around. They were all towards the middle of the frame, and I thought, they've done that so that when it comes to the 2.40:1 DCP releases and the home video or streaming releases, they haven't got to reposition them and spend more money. That seemed to work quite well, and I was framing it in my head and thought, I think I prefer the way this looks as a widescreen, a film of old, because it's got that sort of epic film to it, that sort of ambition. And indeed in here, because just like most cinemas, this home cinema has got the biggest possible image in the widest format. So if I actually open up the curtains here and show you how the masking works, if you'll stick with me for a moment. If I was showing this in the IMAX aspect ratio in here, obviously it wouldn't be genuine IMAX. it would look something like this. And that means that to get the 2.40 to 1, you do get the widest image, but then you have to bring the top and bottom masking down a bit at the top and up a bit from the bottom to get that scope frame that I've loved through so much of my cinema going history. And having just seen Dune Part 2 at the BFI IMAX relatively recently, there's no way you can compare this to a genuine IMAX theatre, but when you're sat just 10 feet or so away to a screen that's about 10 feet wide, it does give you a similar sort of impact to what you experience in a good cinema. So nothing quite as good as the BFI IMAX in here. The sound did match up quite well, and we were thumped and rumbled around a bit quite a lot here with the subwoofer where it is, and being a big subwoofer as well. So although you can't compare to what we experienced at the BFI IMAX with that amazing sound system, the 85-foot wide screen, and to give you some idea of scale, I'll show you some of the shots of the introduction when they had the slideshow running. You can see the silhouettes of people coming in. You just cannot recreate that in the home unless you've got some massive warehouse. But of the two, I think I'd have to say the BFI IMAX gets the edge, and part of that is because they put that 4K video onto a genuine 1570 IMAX print, and you've got that distinctive film look that cannot be replicated by anything else, even though I tend to think, or I like to think, I get pretty close in here with this video projector. It had an estimated budget of $190 million, and it grossed at the worldwide box office, so far at least, $712 million. Denis Villeneuve likes to do as much in camera as possible and therefore keep visual effects to a minimum, but obviously this is a science fiction film, you can't eliminate them completely, but the visual effects in here are seamless and I didn't notice any degradation in image quality. It was shot almost entirely in Jordan and Abu Dhabi, but a bit at the end in Namibia, I believe. But the scenery, the desert scenery, it does give you that otherworldly feeling as though you're on an alien planet on the other side of the universe. So very impressive to look at, but what binds it all together, and I think it's most important in this film, is the sound, in particular Hans Zimmer's score. But the sound effects too, the thumping, it all gives you this Dune-like atmosphere that sucks you in and keeps you there. But I find it a bit of a hypnotic film. I did the first one, so don't watch this if you're feeling at all tired, because it might just knock you out to sleep in places. So one perhaps for blacking out the room and watching earlier in an evening than late at night, because you wouldn't want to fall asleep and miss any of this. Some scenes similar to Dune were shot during twilight, and this gives it a sort of dull, almost too dark looking places, but I felt it was darker in Dune, and there was one scene in particular, the sandworm scene in Dune, that I felt was too dark. I still feel it's too dark actually, but I do realise that this is system to system. We're getting variations, and indeed in my review, the 4K review of Dune, which I did early in 2022, that resulted in a very healthy discussion in the comments. Some people were reporting they didn't have that issue, and others were reporting they had the same issue. And fortunately, we then got some people report that saw the film in 2 and 3 different cinemas, and they reported they were having similar experiences in different cinemas, with some being too dark, some being too light, which just goes to show it's not only our home systems that all vary, but it's actually cinema systems too. If anything in here, I felt that this 4K disc of Dune Part 2 was actually overblown. I had got the laser lamp set to 50%, its lowest setting, and well, I'd been through the whole gamut of things, and I'd had it set as dull as I could possibly get it, but I could tell that it was overblown because some of the subtitles that were perfect on the 1570 print of the IMAX were a bit washed out in here, and then some of the duller sequences were slightly too dark, whereas in the IMAX they were perfectly visible. So you lose with these things, but overall I think I have to concede the BFI IMAX presented a better screening of a Dune Part 2 than I was able to achieve in here with my home system. No surprise there, I hear you scream. Is this worth £25 though? Well, that's up to you. If you love the film at the cinema, then I dare say you probably can't wait to get your hands on this. But there was a steelbook option offered by HMV which sold out on pre-order months ago. That is £35, or at least it was, but that comes with both the Blu-ray and the 4K, so that would probably be the more sensible purchase. Then again, if you've got everything on the 4K, what do you need the Blu-ray for? Well, that's the hope anyway. So would I recommend this? Well, if you like the film, if you can't wait to see it because you've seen Dune Part 1 and you love that, then yes, I'd recommend this. I think anyone who liked the original Dune is going to enjoy this. I've really got into the characters now. Can't wait for a part 3, assuming they're going to make it, and let's hope they've got the same team involved. But it would be nice if Denis Villeneuve would start using a bit of 1565, if that's possible, out in the desert without jamming the cameras up. Maybe he could speak to Christopher Nolan for some guidance there, or Hoyte van Hoytema, more like, the fabulous cameraman who got the Oscar for Oppenheimer. But anyway, I think it's a very good release, and despite the price tag, thoroughly enjoyed it in here. 2 hours and 46-minute running time, so if you love these films, you certainly get your money's worth there. Right, I think that brings us to the end, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and perhaps consider subscribing so I'll be encouraged to carry on creating content like this. Until the next video, bye bye for now.